Easter Sunday, but the crowd nonetheless will turn out in the tens of thousands a day around the route of the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the Tour of Flanders. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video from World Cycling Productions. I'm Phil Liggett, alongside me is Paul Showing. Now Paul Showing used to ride this race. What about the weather today?
Well, I've got to say, fabulous. This is what certain bike riders are dreaming about. They want a wet Tour of Flanders and a wet Paris-Roubaix. And I think nowadays a lot of the journalists do, because when you get conditions like this, it makes the race epic.
Speaking around to the journalists and people this morning, I said, what a terrible day. They said, no, it's a great day. This is perfect for the Tour de Flanders. And they're absolutely right, because it will make for a great race. Now, the route itself, it hasn't changed. It's around about 250 kilometres. They have moved the position of the Molenberg on the course, but the 15 climbs, as always, come near the end, Paul.
No, it's all about, Phil, the start for me is at the Old Quaremont. That's where the race really begins to split up into different groups, followed very quickly by the Koppenberg, and the big famous climbs towards the end are always the Muur de Grammont and, of course, the Bosberg, where everyone wants to try and make that leap for victory.
Well, favourites, there are many of them on a race like this. Really, it's all about positioning. Stay at the front and hold it as long as you can on the slippery cobblestones. Lance Armstrong is here, but I don't think we'll call him a favourite. He's here to prepare for the upcoming Tour de France on roads similar to the opening week of the Tour. There are some good Belgian riders here, though, Paul.
Certainly, there's a couple of them as well. Stijn de Volder and Tom Boonen have got to be number 1 and 2 favourite, but they're going to get challenged by a man, I reckon, from Switzerland, because Fabian Cancellara, I think, and you'll agree with me, can do almost anything on a bike.
And for the Brits, what about David Miller, coming off a victory just down the road here at De Panne this week and saying he's confident? Mark Cavendish is in the race, but saying he's supporting Bernard Eisel. Fabian Cancellara, then?
I think Cancellara is going to be the man to watch. He will fly over these cobblestones. He's got the right body shape. He's got the right speed and tenacity. But watch out for the Americans, because I reckon George Hincapie is coming to form at the moment. Just 4th in Gent-Wevelgem recently. And, of course, he's got a challenge going to come from Tyler Farrar, who, although a sprinter, I think really enjoys these cobblestones.
All right, but it's time for Paul Showing now to go inside, get the interviews for the riders. I'm going for a cup of tea. We'll see you in a moment.
Well, lads, you haven't been to the Tour of Flanders for a long time. Have you forgotten this kind of atmosphere?
It's always this way. I mean, look at this square here in Bruges. I mean, it couldn't have a more beautiful start. Of course, the weather didn't really cooperate, but epic race. I mean, it's one of the true beauties in cycling, so it's fun to be here and experience it.
You've said that you wanted to experience it this year, really, because it's part of your preparation up to the cobbles in the Tour de France later in the season.
I think it's important. I mean, it's one thing to go and see those sections from the Tour, which, you know, checking the course, you have 7 sections in the last part of the race. It'll be decisive. But it's also another opportunity to check equipment. I think equipment is evolving on the pave, and you know, in the old days we rode big, heavy Classics wheels, and now we're riding deep dish rims, and see how they react. And you don't want to get caught out on the 3rd stage this summer.
The weather is nasty though, lads, and you've always done great performances in the wind and rain like this. Will you be okay today?
I don't know. I used to do great when I was younger. Now it's, you know, I can't lie. I open the curtains and I say, it's raining.
Good luck. Hi, strong boy. Well, George, nice to see a smile on your face with weather conditions like this.
Yeah, I mean, you can only just, if you don't laugh, you cry, but it's going to be an epic day, you know, for everybody. And I got good legs. I hope that I can have some good luck and be there with the best at the end.
A new team for you, but a great performance last week in Gent-Wevelgem. That must give you a little bit of confidence going forward.
Absolutely. I started the year a bit slow. I was a little bit sick coming over to Europe, but I started San Remo. I started feeling better. Gent-Wevelgem, I felt back to normal and hoping for even better today.
A lot of people look at these races and think they're totally mad, but for some reason over the last few years, you've been motivated by Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. Tell me why.
Maybe it's the insanity of these races. You know, it's almost impossible to describe how hard and how intense they are. And I believe that's one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, why I really enjoy them.
All right, George, good luck today.
Thank you.
Tour, a little difficult start to the year with all the illnesses, but you seem to be coming onto form right now. And I think you'll enjoy these weather conditions.
Yeah, I mean, these weather conditions is okay for me. Of course, I like when it's sunny, but compared to other ones, I think it's an advantage.
Is it going to be a disadvantage for you losing Heinrich Hausler just before the start?
Yeah, of course, our team is weaker without Hausler and Andreas Klier on the start, so if we had both of them, we were a really strong team. Now we're a bit weaker, but still we're a good team, and I'm in good form, so hopefully we can do something. Thanks.
Hi, mate. How's it form? Yeah, it's all right.
Op 2 wielen, Mark Cavendish.
Well, you've ridden a few races in Belgium, but this one really is something special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the most special day of the year for bike racing, if you ask me. It's nothing really compares to the Tour of Flanders.
The team, I think, are in the best form that they've been in for this Classics campaign right now. David Miller just winning the Tour of the 3 days of La Panne. You must have good confidence.
Yeah, I mean, everything's going well. You know, I won a stage a few days ago in De Panne. Dave won a stage in the overall. Martijn and Johan are both looking good, so we have a lot of options today.
The important thing about the Tour of Flanders, though, is to have a solid team and a lot of riders down towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy race. There's a lot of luck involved. So having a few cards to play helps in case someone's in a crash, someone has a unfortunate time flat. But no, we're feeling good. Everyone's condition's top notch, and we'll see how it goes today.
A lot of riders from Garmin in the finale, then.
I hope so.
The gun will go a little bit of a neutralised rollout as we leave Bruges, and then we'll be catching up with the action out on the road.
Well, the weather changing dramatically because it was rainstorms coming in and out throughout the morning as the riders were signing in, and it looks very much here on the finish line as if the rain is about to return to the Ronde van Vlaanderen. This is the ceremonial start, Phil. They'll move away from Bruges, and once they leave the magical beauty of this city centre here, it'll be the neutralised flag in and the race will be on.
It is a beautiful city, the lace capital of Belgium. I think it's one of the most romantic of all of the Belgian cities. They'll go out towards the ring road first of all before they head towards Ostend, as the route takes them out on a circuitous route today. But they'll cover quite a few kilometres before they turn and plunge into deepest Flanders, where lies 15 small climbs, which will surely decide this race. Once the race gets underway, there's always a breakaway, but it's a question of who's in it as to whether it will have any chance at all of succeeding. Lance Armstrong, Paul, he's really riding this race to check out the cobbled roads because of the upcoming Tour de France in July.
Exactly. He was very specific about that this morning, that it's extremely important for him to check out the cobblestones, not only just to see whether or not he can still race over them, but more importantly, I think, to try out the kind of equipment that he wants to use in the month of July. And that could be a pivotal stage in the Tour de France, the stage that goes over 7 sections of cobblestones, and the finale of that stage on the run into France.
Seen one canal, seen them all. Well, this is Belgium. It's the land of canals, and for those who are racing cyclists here, this is a shunt, and this is going to be, I would think we'll see a lot of this on the roads today, Paul. Narrow, wet, especially as they've got a new section of the course as well by the Molenberg, which is cobbled.
A bit unfortunate that fall there, because that in fact was Enrico Gasparotto, a rider who is in pretty fine form at the moment and may well be one of the strongmen for Team Astana.
Early morning wake-up call. Now the action is underway. The flag has gone in as we start to settle in.
You can see as you look at the way the race opened up, everybody wanted to get into what the French like to call the échappée matinale, the early morning break.
Well, the first attack here is coming from Floris Goossenen of the Skill Shimano team. There's a reaction. That's Michele Merlo of the Futon colours, far right of our picture. And it looks as though we're getting a little bit of breakaway. There's our old favourite there, Paul, Vicente Garcia Acosta on the right of our picture, in his 15th season as a professional. Unbelievable.
And a stage victory in the Tour de France for him, Phil, because he won a stage on the race into Draguignan on the 14th of July, Bastille Day, beating the French at their own game.
Well, this is the biggest sporting day for the Belgian fans of any sport in this country. This is their big day out, and do you need any further proof than that to see just how on this Easter weekend they are enjoying the occasion? The Tour of Flanders, and that's exactly what this race is. Right round East and West Flanders, which is the Flemish-speaking section of Belgium, whereas the French-speaking is up in the region of Brussels in the Walloon area. And the artists have been at work. Eddie Merckx in the distance. Eddie says he doesn't like this race because he's only won it twice.
I don't really think he means that, Phil, because this is the race that all of the Belgians, whether you're Flemish or Wallon, want to win if they can, and that's why Philippe Gilbert is going to be really bolstered up today to try and see whether or not he can get the win. Now, if you think the sport of cycling is not popular in Belgium, just take a look at that.
This is Desselgem here. These are the 8 leaders now. I'll give you the composition of them. Michele Merlo of Futon, Servetto and Nicolas Rousseau of AG2R, Joost van Lenen of Vacansoleil, Dutch team rather, Floris Goossenen of Skill Shimano, Vicente Garcia da Costa from Case de Pan, Mikhail Ignatiev of Katusha, Olivier Bonner of Française des Jeux and David Boucher of the Lambrou Credit Team. They got away in that opening couple of kilometres. We'll be catching up with the action very shortly. This is the route that they're riding today. From Bruges we go out to the coast to Ostend, then we start to return where we find a succession of 15 small climbs. Once we're through Kortrijk, we then get into the hills. They're all numbered from number 1 down to number 15. Den Ast is a new one at the beginning of the race, and then we go right down. And the Molenberg's moved a little bit later. It's now hill number 10. The last one, as always, is the Bosberg coming just before the finish. In all, a total of 261 kilometres.
Yes, but Phil, it's all about that last half of the race there where you see the climbs all concentrated together. You're hitting a climb every 10 to 12 kilometres. You've got to stay at the front, you've got to battle to stay in position, and that's where the race really becomes the survival of the fittest, the race of the strong men.
Well, there's a rumour that they're going to take the race away from the finish in Meerbeeke from next year, and we're at the finishing line doing our commentary, and there's plenty of spectators running around asking for petitions to keep the race in Meerbeeke. There's all those names for you now. It's a good composition because there's a number of riders, 8 men facing to what would be an immense breakaway if it were to succeed. Now the odds are against that happening, but as you can see, they've got 10 minutes and 19 seconds, 145 kilometres to go. They had a maximum of 13 minutes, so already losing a little bit of ground here.
They will continue to lose ground as the big climbs of the day approach. I've always regarded, Phil, the start of the Tour of Flanders really as being the Col du Tourmalet. It's not a very long climb, but it's made more difficult by the fact that once you get over the steepest part of the climb at the bottom, there's a long false flat of around about 1.5 kilometres, completely barren. It's in the potato fields of Flanders, and there's always a crosswind, and that's where the race splits up into a number of groups before then dropping back down into the valley and heading across to the Koppenberg.
A little bit of disorganisation that breakaway at the moment as we swing back towards the leaders here, and it looks as though Team Sky are pretty interested in keeping this race up close today. Greg Henderson, who's part of this team, has already had a good start to the season, but the man who's had the real good start to the season, I think, is Fletcher. Won a classic win, the first one of the year for Team Sky, got him off to a great start. He has to be ranked among the favourites today, so clearly he's putting his team on the front to do the chasing.
Well, he knows this part of the world. Obviously, he's had success in the early part of the season on the very similar road to the ones he'll race over today. And he's always been one of the riders to be in contention for the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. And strange, really, and I continue to say this for a Spanish rider, because very often the Spanish riders are motivated by the mountains. But Juan Antonio Fletcher is completely motivated by this week of racing. Achteraan van de peloton, the back end of the main field. As you can see, there's a lot of work and housework has to get done at the back end of the peloton as riders drop back to the team cars to keep their leaders warm up with the rain jackets, keep them with lots of bottles and lots of food. It's a pretty precarious place to be, especially when you're going around these very tight bends. There's big crowds, you've got to slow down, you've got to queue up to get around the corners, as these riders are doing here.
A little bit of picture break up there, that's to be expected. Looks like Wilfried Kretskin's here on the front, isn't it? He's getting a bit long in the tooth now, but he's still pushing over Quick-Step, and 2 likely favourites to protect on that team today of Bonen and De Volder. There's Kevin Holtzmans, sorry, Kevin Holtzmans it was, yeah.
Well, if you look at the length of the main field here, Phil, that's an indication that they're not allowing those riders a great amount of leeway, and probably because there are a couple of solid riders in that breakaway, including, of course, Ignatiev, who was the Olympic points race champion back in 2004, came through the Russian track school, a tough bike rider, and one of the riders who, if this breakaway is given 5 or 6 minutes more advantage, they'll be very tough to put back. There is the Kop van de Wegstrijd, the leaders of the race over on the left-hand side. And over on the right-hand side there, you can see the front end of the main field. Quick-Step and Team Sky and a couple of riders from Astana, but they're there more than anything else, Phil, trying to slow down the advantage.
Well, they've got themselves a pretty good tempo out there, Paul. The weather is quite pleasant at the moment, to be absolutely honest, but there are dark clouds blowing around here, coming in off the coast as they make their way back down towards the first climbs of the day. Still a long way to go, but they're not letting this breakaway get out of hand. A little bit surprised they've started to take up the chase, or at least Team Sky have, which indicates to me they've got a likely man in the form of Fletcher, who might do well. Looks like Michael Barry tapping out the rhythm here.
Yeah, he'll be the sacrificial lamb. His job will be to ride on the front end of the main field as long as he can this afternoon. That's the important thing to remember about a bike race like this. The guys who've got to come out and unleash their accelerations on the final climbs of the Ronde van Vlaanderen have got to hide in the pack for as long as 4.5 hours to just try and stay relaxed and let their teammates do the pacemaking, let their teammates put their faces into the wind for hours on end to make sure that the advantage doesn't go too high. These riders we're looking at here, Phil, had a maximum advantage of 13 minutes at one stage, and now for the first time this afternoon it's come inside of 10. That's Jose Garcia Vicente Acosta on the front there. He's a rider who was for a long time ridden alongside riders like Miguel Indurain. He's been one of the pillars of Team Case d'Epargne, which in the past has been known as iBenesto.com, Benesto, Team Reynolds, a very, very famous team in the sport of professional cycling.
One or two big names who are out in front, including Mikhail Ignatieff for Katusha. On form, he won the 6th stage of Tirreno Adriatico in Italy at the start of the season, so he's got himself good legs. Like many of these Russian cyclists, they base themselves in Italy. This is Kevin Hulsmann, so Quick Step have decided to help out a little bit on the early pursuit. Remember also that they're going to keep the pressure on now because they want to get their leaders safely into the front of the race as they go into the narrow roads. Staying the Volder, Quick Step, and shows the flashes of the former Belgian champion there, twice the winner of this event the last 2 years. He's come in for a little bit of critique off his director sportif, Patrick Lefebvre, who says he doesn't like riders who only in one race a year, which is what De Volder did last year. But what a race to win, and for the second time. A little bit unfair, I think, that criticism.
Well, the criticism coming from the fact that he's paid an awful lot of money to race for 12 months of the year, or at least 10 of those, and was a long time tipped by the team as being a contender for the Tour de France, but he's never been able to slip into that role. And I think Patrick Lefebvre obviously giving not only the Stijn de Volder a little bit of stick, but one or two other riders on the squad as well. He didn't have very many bad things, though, Phil, to say about Tom Bonen, who's been fairly quiet this year. He's won 4 races so far, but I think Bonen has got very good form. The difficult thing is one of his major contenders is in the same squad.
I think it's fair to say that Patrick's always had a little bit of a soft spot in his heart for Tom Bonen, even when he's been going through his traumatic periods with his cocaine entrapment, should we say, and the outer competition checks. And Patrick's always been there to defend him. Alejandro Balán, a new team for him. He's moved across to BMC to be alongside Cadel Evans in the Tours of France and Italy, former world champion. Took a long time to get back to form the following year after winning that world title.
Yeah, he had a lot of illness problems, but he did start to get back to form during the Tour de France last year. But just talking about Team BMC, what a squad they've pulled together for the classics here, because when you read through the list that they've got on the start line, Alessandro Balán, Marcus Burkhardt, George Hincapie, Carsten Krul, Martin Kohler, and that's not a bad number of riders to bring to a classics race like this.
No, it is not. All great classic men with big classic reps as well.
Well, it's still Michael Barry and Kevin Hulsmann who are the sacrificial lambs at the front here. They've got to do this pacemaking, and they're actually doing a fairly impressive job, Phil, because we were looking at 13 minutes. We're now down to just 9.5 minutes advantage here for that leading group of riders. And we're still a long, long way from the first big climb of the day, and that will be, well, the first one is actually behind them. That's a fairly small climb, and I think it's that once we start to get the Knokteberg and the older Quaremont, that's when we're really going to start to see that gap tumble rapidly. Looking still at 140 kilometers to go. For most people, that's a normal race distance. That's about 95 miles of racing. Here, these guys have already been in the saddle for 120 kilometers in this 260k day.
Well, at the moment, they're picking up a tailwind, although we're getting a bit of a slowdown. It's just the width of the road here. They're going to get plenty of narrow roads once they start. And just having a little problem with his shoes there. He's tore Hushoft himself.
Yeah, he's just getting himself ready, Phil, for an acceleration. These riders have seen that after the early morning rain, the rain has disappeared and they're having to start to get themselves undressed and ready for action. That was Thomas Vogler getting his race radio back into position to make sure that he knows exactly what's going on. And Vogler himself has had a pretty good start to the season.
He has, and well, you can say his whole team has, because B-Box are just winning race after race. They've had 3 victories in the last 7 days. So they're on a big high as far as success goes, And they'll be looking, I think we'll see them in the action towards the big finale today as we get down to those final flurry of hills, and it really is every man for himself. At this stage of the race, what they want to do, Paul, is just try and keep out of trouble. The men who really fancy the chances, they can't afford bad luck. That's the thing on these early roads.
And that's the important thing. Once you get to the strategic points of the Tour of Flanders, you've got to stay at the front. You've got to battle to stay in the top 15 or 20 places, because when you do have bad luck, it's always at the back end of the pack, and that's why you'll see a battle for the front 15 to 20 places.
Well, that is a very angry peloton very early on. They are pulling back this breakaway quite rapidly now. It's heading up towards the 9-minute marker. 139 kilometers still to go. All 15 climbs are still to come as we head down towards the finish in Ninove, which is actually in the suburb of Meerbeke. Slightly uphill finish, traditional approach, right-hand turn, a few hundred meters before the line. Have to judge your sprint very, very well. The women's race also in the Women's World Cup will be underway shortly, and they're heading towards us. They start in Oudenaarde, which is where the famous cycling museum is held, and I was speaking to the curator this morning. He was telling me that they are inundated now with visitors from Australia, from South Africa, and from Great Britain, and from the United States. It is really worth a visit. It's a magnificent museum, and it's now being managed by the great Freddie Martins. Talking of great men, we're now looking at the great Lance Armstrong.
Well, Armstrong rode this race on a number of occasions. The last time he raced as that Super Domestique for George Hincapie, trying to get Hincapie the win in these two races that Hincapie really adores. And I'm talking, of course, about today's Ronde van Vlaanderen, but also talking about Paris-Roubaix, which is in 7 days' time. There will be a fair acceleration in the peloton now, Phil, because we've just come through the small town of Kruishouten, and in about 3 kilometres' time, there's a 2-kilometre stretch of cobblestones. These are not like the cobblestones of Paris-Roubaix next week, but you still have to make sure you ride at the front end of the pack, because there will be a lot of moisture on the surface of these cobblestones. Riders will be slipping left and right, flat tyres, people will get left behind, and you don't want to waste any valuable energy.
Matty Breschel not too far off the front at the moment either. He wants to see his way up this first climb, I guess. He's not too happy at playing second fiddle to Fabian Cancellara in the favourites tag today. I think he really fancies his own chances, so probably playing the situation, see how it goes, see where he is after a little while out front. Johan van Summeren, very strange to see him riding in the Garmin Transitions colours, isn't it?
They too, Phil, have bolstered up their squad for the classics as well, because, and of course, van Summeren can bolster them for the classics and for the great stage races, because he's one of those guys who just sits on the front end of the main field and pounds out a very dramatic tempo.
Looks as though he might be a bit short of training, Paul. Bit of pain on the face there of Johan van Summeren today, but he's riding on home soil, even though he rides for the American setup, and he's going to want to impress if he can today. That peloton is moving very, very quickly. A lot of movement at the back here as riders concertina. They're racing and using energy just to stay in the peloton right now. The boys at the front all nice and close together. 9:03, they are knocking this off very, very quickly.
Yeah, we're just circumnavigating the town of Kruishouten. We've left, of course, Waregem behind us. We're getting closer and closer to the first climbs of the day. There's Stuart O'Grady there in Saxo Bank Squad. A difficult start to the year for Stuart with a bit of illness, but he seems to be now riding himself into a bit of form. But I think today and next week he'll be riding in support of course, Cancellara, who's had a win in Belgium, the Grand Prix E3, and Matty Breschel, who won the very famous race Dwars door België, Vlaanderen, and that's the race across the Flanders.
Well, Stuart O'Grady, as far as one-day classics are concerned, will be best remembered for his great victory in the Paris-Roubaix in 2007. But today, you're quite right. He had such bad luck again crashing last year in Milan-San Remo. It was a horrible crash. You may have seen that crash where he broke his collarbone, ribs, and he punctured a lung. It took him a long time. He never really got back to top form, but he still got his enthusiasm for bike racing, and that's what's most important, as it looks as though the pace is beginning to hot up there. This is Koen Barber, the Landbau Credit team, looking for somebody to take his wet top now.
Well, Armstrong rode this race on a number of occasions. The last time he raced as that Super Domestique for George Hincapie, trying to get Hincapie the win in these two races that Hincapie really adores. And I'm talking, of course, about today's Ronde van Vlaanderen, but also talking about Paris-Roubaix, which is in 7 days' time. There will be a fair acceleration in the peloton now, Phil, because we've just come through the small town of Kruishouten, and in about 3 kilometres' time, there's a 2-kilometre stretch of cobblestones. These are not like the cobblestones of Paris-Roubaix next week, but you still still have to make sure you ride at the front end of the pack, because there will be a lot of moisture on the surface of these cobblestones. Riders will be slipping left and right, flat tyres, people will get left behind, and you don't want to waste any valuable energy.
Matty Breschel not too far off the front at the moment either. He wants to see his way up this first climb, I guess. He's not too happy at playing a second fiddle to Fabian Cancellara in the favourites tag today. I think he really fancies his own chances, so probably playing the situation, see how it goes, see where he is after a little while out front. Johan van Summeren, very strange to see him riding in the Garmin Transitions colours, isn't it?
They too, Phil, have bolstered up their squad for the classics as well, because, and of course Van Summeren can bolster them for the classics and for the great stage races, because he's one of those guys who just sits on the front end of the main field and pounds out a very dramatic tempo.
Looks as though he might be a bit short of training, Paul. Bit of pain on the face there of Johan van Summeren today, but he's riding on home soil, even though he rides for the American setup, and he's going to want to impress if he can today. That peloton is moving very, very quickly. A lot of movement at the back here as riders Concertina. They're racing and using energy just to stay in the peloton right now. The boys at the front all nice and close together. 9:03, they are knocking this off very, very quickly.
Yeah, we're just circumnavigating the town of Kruishouten. We've left, of course, Waregem behind us. We're getting closer and closer to the first climbs of the day. There's Stuart O'Grady there in Saxo Bank squad. A difficult start to the year for Stuart with a bit of illness, but he seems to be now riding himself into a bit of form. But I think today and next week he'll be riding in support of course, Cancellara, who's had a win in Belgium, the Grand Prix E3, and Matty Breschel, who won the very famous race Dwars door België, Vlaanderen, and that's the race across the Flanders.
Well, Stuart O'Grady, as far as one-day classics are concerned, we'd best remember his great victory in the Paris-Roubaix in 2007. But today, you're quite right. He had such bad luck again crashing last year in Milan-San Remo. It was a horrible crash. You may have seen that crash where he broke his collarbone, ribs, and he punctured a lung. It took him a long time. He never really got back to top form, but he still got his enthusiasm for bike racing, and that's what's most important. As it looks as though the pace is beginning to hot up there. This is Koen Barber, the Landbau Credit team, looking for somebody to take his wet top now.
Well, the weather has smartened up for Flanders, but I think a lot of the cobblestone sections, Phil, will be still a little bit damp because it's been raining for a long time there. Just slipping back through the crowd there for Team Sky as the champion of Norway.
Norway, yeah.
Arvesen.
He's had his problems this year as well, but it looks as though he's fighting his way back into the game now.
Sky, Phil, I think have had a great amount of success, really, considering it's a team that was pulled together. There's a crash in the middle there. These are the little silly accidents that happen all the time. Block up the back end of the main field. You've got to accelerate. I can't see exactly who's involved there. Looks like there's a quick step rider. A rider from Saxo Bank as well.
Well, a bit of bent machinery, but it looks as though everybody is getting up. Just one rider's hurt his hip.
Tom Bonan delayed over on the left-hand side, but he's riding up. And in fact, that's Tyler Farah, number 122.
Well, that is not good. That's a shame for Tyler Farah here. He looks as though his bike isn't going to fire. No, his bike's gone into the ditch now. At the moment, the race is not full on, so he's got a chance here, but this is not good. Julian Dean is waiting for him.
Julian Dean up alongside him. He will wait to try and pace him back. He's now got to wait and see whether or not they can bring another bike up to him. He's waiting. He's not panicking at all. He doesn't look as if he's injured at all,
no,
Phil. The mechanics are there, and there's a bit of confusion. But I did see Tyler Farrar just touching his push-to-talk button to say, excuse me, I need a bike and I don't need any wheels.
Well, there's a little slow motion. Right in the centre of the peloton. Touch your wheels, a silly crash. It happens all the time. But this, I was only just moments ago saying you've got to have luck. And Farrar is amongst the favourites today. And now his luck is out right here. There it is, right in the centre.
And it looked to me, Phil, as if that was on the part of the road that they call in Belgium Death Valley. See that black line down the middle of the road? Well, these roads in Belgium are made out of concrete, cement. And they're stuck together with a little bit of sealing down the middle. And sometimes there's a gap in that. And riders very, very often go down on it.
Now, I get the impression, Paul, that the riders have sat up a little bit, eased off the pace here. They might feel that's an unfair advantage they've taken, and they might be slowing down. So this might be good news for Farah, but in any case, he's going to come back and he'll be at the back, and we're not far from the first climb.
And we're not far from the first section of cobbles either, Phil, because we're looking at a section of cobblestones which is going to start any moment now. It's a long section of cobblestones at around 1.8 kilometres long. And look at the gap too, although they have slowed down, it's down to 8 minutes and 40 seconds. And if you just look at the fields, those aren't fields of soil there, those are fields of mud.
Yeah.
You certainly don't want to slip off into the dike at the side of the road.
No, there'll be no coming back from that. You'll be stuck to the ground. But here we are. The leaders are on that section of cobblestones, 8 minutes ahead up the road.
This is Wangenendorp. It's 1.8 kilometres long, and afterwards there's a shorter section of 200 metres. So you're looking at around about a 2 kilometre stretch. This is a stretch of cobbles, in fact, that years ago was extremely dangerous. But if you look at the way it's constructed now, they've actually been relayed into almost a ceremonial section of cobblestones. Not dangerous at all, but enough just to shake the body and make the back start to hurt and make the arms tend to get a little bit stressed out.
Just sat on the back here, Joost van Lenen from Vacansoleil. A team that narrowly missed out in a wildcard selection last week for the Tour de France. They seem to have been very philosophical about non-selection, unlike Skill Shimano, who are really quite bitter that they never got named after the reasonably good performance in the Tour de France. But it was a very difficult decision for the organisation as to who to leave out of the Tour, especially with Team Sky coming on the block as well. But anyway, Team Sky got the nod at the end of the day, and Team BMC with the world champion Cadel Evans, and that cost the Skill Shimano and Vacansoleil their places. And the irony is, of course, as always happens, Skill Shimano are winning just about every race at the moment. But there we are.
Well, it's a tough call to call the participants of the Tour de France, which happens in the month of July, as early as March or April of a racing season. And it is you've got to consider a lot of different aspects, not only the sporting aspect but also the economic aspect as well of what it's going to bring to the race.
Well, we can't tell you whether Tyler Farrar is chasing, but we must presume he is, and whether he gets back, and we don't know the answer. Maybe from the helicopter you'll see riders coming through the convoy of vehicles behind. Certainly the peloton has slowed down a little bit. This is the back of the peloton here, and as you can see, taking the chance here now to just strip off. There's the man hoping to do something today as well, Lars Bak of HTC Columbia.
Well, he's looking after that man there, number 133, Bernard Eisel.
He shouldn't be here giving away his clothing, I wouldn't have thought. Not the place to be right now.
But this is the job that he is used to, Phil. He's used to being the big team helper, the man who sacrifices himself for the team. But given his own right the other day, he was able to come up with the victory at the end of Gent-Wevelgem, which is why he's one of the big favourites for today's race.
Head of the race, Kop van der Wedstrijd, and this is a slight drop in Leiderdorp, 200 metres downhill in cobbles. I bet the boys are glad the rain stopped now, Paul.
They certainly are. A couple of kilometres down the road from here, they will get the first start of the climbs, the 15 climbs of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And it's a small climb, and it's not a cobble climb. It's the climb of Den Ast.
If you're just joining us, just to confirm, it's Michele Merlo of Fouton Servetto, Nicolas Rousseau of AG2R, Joost van Lenen of Vacansoleil, Floris Gusenin of Skill, Vicente Garcia da Costa of Case de Pan, Mikhail Ignatiev of Team Katusha, Oliver Bonner, FDJ, and David Boucher of Lambau Credit. They're the leaders.
Some breaking news just coming through that could change the race a fraction. They are announcing there's a possibility that the route may bypass the Koppenberg climb because of the fact that the organisation feel that the surface is too slippery for the riders to participate. Now, if we go back and look at the history of the Koppenberg over the years, there has been an awful lot of accidents on it, and a lot of riders have not been able to ride it but have had to walk it.
Well, that would be disappointing, because I'm sure there's a huge crowd waiting on the Koppenberg, and if somebody doesn't tell them quickly, they won't have any chance to get around the course and see the race somewhere else. But this morning we have had very heavy rain. There's no question of that. It's dried out very quickly, especially on these concrete slabs. The cobbles will remain quite slippery, I think. And as we drove to the finish line from the start line, clearly there'd been more rain in the area of the hills that didn't come to Bruges at the start. It's all gone for the moment. Having said that, we have very dark clouds overhead here, and it could come back at any time. These are the leaders. They got away almost from the gun today, and they've been out front for a very, very long time. About half distance here at 132 kilometres. They've been in the lead for approximately 130 kilometres so far. Maximum lead they've had, 13 minutes. It's coming down now. It's 8:43.
It's coming down very steadily and consistently, just ticking away a couple of seconds every now and then, but it will start to drop and tumble once we get into the hilly section of this race, which is pretty much the last 80 kilometers of the race. Here you can see it's down to 8 minutes 42. This is the site of Flanders, though, Phil, just weaving left and right through these agricultural fields. You never know really which direction you're going, north, south, east, west. And for riders from different parts of Europe, they can feel extremely lost in this part of the world, which gives the Belgians the advantage. They know exactly where they are at any one time.
Oh, at the back of the field, I didn't see number 122 there. That's the number of Tyler Farrar, the American favourite, who has been in delay by that crash. He got a long wait for a bike change, but we'll just keep you informed if and when we know. Stuart O'Grady sent a black rider on the right here now, riding and looking very strong. And in fact, Saxo Bank quite clearly feel they have the man in Fabian Cancellara, because they put 3 riders up here now to really start this chase very early on. And we're heading towards the first climb, and this means that only the strongest will get to the front of this peloton.
Well, you know, they are a very dedicated squad team, Saxo Bank. They've been pulled together by Bjarne Riis, who's doing a phenomenal job of getting the team motivated, not only for their leaders, Cancellara and Matti Breschel over on the right-hand side in the red and white jersey there, but it's almost a team of musketeers. It's all for one and one for all.
Yep.
But there are 8 men here.
Well, there he is. That's the man they're working for in the red jersey, as champion of Switzerland, Fabian Cancellara. This is Matti Breschel in the similar coloured jersey, but he's champion of Denmark. All on the same team here, and they've got control of this race now, that's for sure. And they're thinking of the first climb, when there might be a first selection early on. These are the leaders. The sun is over the top of the leaders at the moment. That can only be good news at this stage of the race. They must know now that the chase is coming on.
They know it, Phil, and they would just try and survive and conserve as much of their advantage as possible. But they know that in around about 30 kilometers time, they'll be all lining up for the Knokteberg, which is rapidly followed by the Col du Tourmalet, and that's where the race really starts to split. But it's interesting to know that the teams like Team Saxo Bank are already starting to take a serious attention to the time gap of this breakaway. Look how small these roads are. This is the Flanders.
This is Flanders for you, and this is why it's such good racing. And this is the first climb of 15 now. Den Ast, 11% gradient maximum. We're in the region of Oudenaarde now, and not too far away from here is where the women's race has already started. That's heading towards the finishing line.
Nice to know that the security that the organisation have put in here, they've got barriers on the left-hand side. It's a very narrow road, but they've also got a rail on the right-hand side to keep the crowd back, allowing the riders a nice safe passage through these very narrow parts of the course. Not a very difficult climb, I suppose. The ceremonial climb number 1 of 15. It's the ones that are in the middle and down towards the end that start to get tough when they've got to climb, and then you throw in some cobbles into the menu.
Yes, a nice easy commencement into Flanders here as they go over the top. 14 climbs still to come. Some of them are really hard, very steep, very cobbled. The Muur de Grammont, the Wall of Grammont. That comes near the end of Bosberg, which is so often in the years gone by been the final springboard for a breakaway that's been successful to the finish. We'll see. That still lies ahead of these 8 riders, as they now nearly another minute has been knocked off here as we head towards the 8-minute mark. Not doing too much work at the back, at least when we join him. Joost van Leenen from the Vacances Soleil has been sat at the back here, doesn't seem too happy. He may know that the catch will be inevitable. Maybe he's got plans if they catch up.
Just a small section of cobblestones here, Phil, 500 meters in length. This is the Lange Asterstraat. It's smooth cobblestones as well, but all of these cobblestone sections, what they do is they start to weaken the body. They tire your reactions a little bit. Having been at the front of the bike races, those guys have been for a long time. They're now starting to get a little bit sore. O'Grady here, obviously sacrificing himself for the team today, but you see how the whole of Saxo Bank have come to the front. They don't want to be involved in any of that stuff at the back.
And the windmill, its sails have been turned on for the passing of the Ronde van Vlaanderen today. I must say it's turning with some gusto as well right now, as we look here at Saxo Bank continuing to set the pressure. They've been very impressive here. They've taken control of this race. They've pushed everybody off the front, and that is so they can see this climb coming up.
Well, it's so they can see this section of cobbles that they're on as well, because they're on the Waregem Dorp cobblestone section. They're 1.8 kilometers. They want to ride at the front to make sure that if there are any accidents, if anybody slips and makes a cut in the main field, their favourites are in the front of that and not going to expend excessive energy.
A lot of work being done here. The cobblestones, Paul, things drop off your bike. You never knew you had on these cobblestones.
No, they'll pound the bike, and one of the most dangerous things, in fact, is a rider's bottle. You see this guy here, although we're on a flat section of the course here, he's suffering to stay in contact with the main field. This is Marcin Sapa of Team Lampre, and you have to be very careful with your bottle, for example, because if you don't squash down the bottle cage and make sure the bottle is tight, it'll fall out. It might not be too bad for you, because a little bit later you can take on a bottle, but that bottle can roll in the ground in front of another rider, and if you try and swerve to avoid it on the cobblestones, you'll usually find yourself going down.
Yes, it can be very dangerous to the riders behind, that's for sure. We had a terrible situation on the descent of the Kemmelberg a couple of years ago in Ghent-Wevelgem. Bottle went everywhere, and so did riders. And I think it was the year when Tyler Farrar actually broke his kneecap. Anyway, as you can see, these are very typical Belgian farm roads here. Slab concrete. Don't get wandering off into the gutters, because that's where you'll be found to be in no man's land. See the gutter on the right there.
Well, just Phil, casting your mind back a couple of minutes to how relaxed O'Grady looked at the front end of the main field, but when you look at the back of the peloton, that gives you an idea of the damage that these guys are doing. They are really eating into that advantage. It's now under 8 minutes. Huterovic at the back there, Phil, is a great sprinter, and he's had some fair success over the last 2 years.
He's got 13 wins to his credit since he turned pro back in 2007. He's a champion of Belarus. He's pretty good at bunny hopping too. He's come over that grating in the road. Still the crowds are out. I think everybody in Belgium who hasn't planned to leave the country for the weekend of Easter are watching the Tour de Flanders pass by.
Well, seeing that bunny hop there, Phil, reminds me there's a very good cyclocross champion in this field, Lars Boemen. At the start, he was interviewed by one of my colleagues from Belgian television. He said, "So, Lars Boom, are you going to be working for Nick Noyens today?" And he said, "Nope, this is my race."
He's very confident for a newcomer, I have to say, but he's got a great talent. It might well be his race, we'll find out. Saxo Bank don't think so. Stuart O'Grady is warning of something in the road there as he sits on the front of the peloton, but just Saxo Bank setting the pace, and look how they pull this race out into a long line of riders. Very aggressive, good riding by Saxo Bank this. They want a big result as well.
No, they certainly do, and they know they've got two strings to their bow. Matty Breschel in the red and white jersey over on the left-hand side, and the other red jersey over on the right-hand side, Fabian Cancellara. And he said very early on in the year, Phil, that there's one race he wants to win this season, and the only race he wants to win this season is the Tour of Flanders.
Well, Stein of Alder, that's what he did last year.
Well, there's Tom Bonen moving to the front. He was at the back just a few moments ago. He was delayed by that accident that Tyler Farrar was involved in, and he saw the fact that that big section of cobblestones was moving up, and immediately there he is in the top 15 to 20. And there's Cancellara in the other red jersey near the front of the pack, looking relaxed.
No update, I'm afraid, on the little accident we saw. Nobody hurt, but we don't know if they're still behind the race, and if at the back, they've still got to get to the front. And Tyler Farrar is the biggest name that was involved there and left by the roadside. 7 3/4 minutes now. The gap is coming down. We've only done one small climb. That's the leaders. The main field here now are heading on to Den Ast, and then we'll see if there's a reaction there. Certainly there'll be a few hurting at the back of the race once we get onto the climb.
And there's just Matteo Tossato of Team Quickstep up at the front end of the pack as well. He's looking after Tom Bonen. Bonen just in the middle there in the Belgian National Champions jersey, a title which he got himself last year. And this gentleman probably doesn't realise that, in fact, the Ronde van Vlaanderen's going by. What's all that about? Oh, there's a bicycle race on, sir. It's, in fact, just going out your front garden.
Well, I'm surprised he's even cutting the grass. It's so wet down there. You have to clean the lawnmower as well.
His wife's just come out to tell him he's on TV.
Yeah. Well,
just making it
you
too.
can't get a better position for the Ronde van Vlaanderen than that, and she just made the finishing line, the touch line there, to watch the riders go through. Very tricky bend in a big peloton. There's a rider there, I think, with a soft tyre too on the right, and waiting for the get to the back for his team car.
Well, it looks like a rice field down there. It really has been torrential rain over the last 48 hours, and the sun has come out and dried the roads for the bike riders, but there will still be a fair amount of slippiness once we get to the cobbles later on. Garcia Acosta at the front there in the black jersey. This is the leading group of 8 riders. From 13 minutes advantage, they're now down to just 7.5.
Well, the grand old man of cycling, Lance Armstrong, has said on his Twitter page today he's the oldest man in the race. Well, Garcia is only about 9 months younger than Lance. He's 37.5 years of age, Garcia da Costa. He turned pro back in 1995. It's the rider in the black I'm talking about. What an incredible bike rider he's been. He's only won 9 races in his career, but he's been such a solid bike rider, and that's why he keeps his places on the big Pro Tour teams.
Especially in the Grand Tours, Phil, because he's a solid man who's capable of riding in the mountain stages and doing a lot of work on the flat. The main field now is getting to that first climb of Dunasta. Not really very much to write home about, 4.5% average gradient. Some of the climbs a little bit later on, kick up to 22% gradient.
So the first climb for the peloton, the gap 7:38. They've halved the overall deficit. They were 13. So they'll be happy with the progress at the moment. Remember, they're not really racing the breakaway. They're figuring that they will come back even at their own momentum. They're just making sure they keep their leaders in the right position, which is near the front on these narrow roads. You never know when there's a flat tyre or a touch of wheels that could quickly alter the shape of the Tour de Flanders today. At the moment, the weather has swung completely around. Some torrential rain at the start. It was drying up as the riders rolled away from the market square in Bruges, and now the sun is out. But I can't say that the rain has gone for the day, because there are black clouds everywhere.
No, everyone's expecting to have a few showers in the latter part of the afternoon. I'm sure most of these riders are hoping that that doesn't come. But they did start off in torrential rain and cold conditions, a temperature hovering around about 10 degrees Celsius. And with the wind and chill factor, that can drop down to just a little bit above freezing at 3 or 4.
So they continue to make their way through. Number 48 at the back there, Pablo Ertezun of Euskaltel Euskadi, the Basque professional team. This is round 2 of the Pro Tour. It's not a competition one takes much notice of, I have to be honest, but it is on the Pro Tour. The first one of the year is the Tour Down Under in Australia. And so Andre Greipel himself is the Pro Tour leader.
He's not defending his lead either.
Well, that is so typical of the competition. It really is a meaningless competition, as competitions go, yeah.
Because he's not taking part. Bernard Eisel is the team leader for Team HTC Columbia here, and the team will rally around him completely. And interesting to see Mark Cavendish coming back, and he's going to try and pay back the favour to Bernard Eisel, who looked after him so stalwartly throughout races like the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France last year.
Now, just scanning the peloton, see if I can see any signs of Tyler Farrar having rejoined the back of the peloton, but well, I haven't spotted him.
I don't think you'll have a problem there, Phil. They weren't. They slowed down for a couple of kilometres, and their team would have been able to get him a bike up very quickly. And he had 2 teammates stopped immediately alongside him. So much did they think he was extremely important. And one of those teammates was Julian Dean, who's a very experienced professional.
The last man on those chasers looked as though it could have been a Garmin rider, but we're too far away. This is the chaos which you don't see on the race, with all the cars stopped for the passage of the Ronde. Many of the spectators know the course inside out. They run for the cars, having seen the race, and reposition themselves to watch its passage again before finally getting down for the finish.
Important thing to do in a bike race of this length is to keep eating. Don't wait until you get hungry to eat. You have to eat every 10 or 12 minutes, just making sure that you're keeping a little bit of weight in the stomach. Keep yourself full of liquid as well. Cancellara just sitting at the front end there. We've seen him do some magnificent races in the past, whether it was winning a stage into Compiègne of the Tour de France with the yellow jersey on his shoulders, or the fabulous time trial he did to win the Tour of Switzerland when it finished on the final day with a time trial right past his front row. He ate that time trial apart. He really is an incredibly talented bike rider. This is where you don't want to be, Phil, at the back with a crosswind.
Well, this is a movement here to try and stop the race splitting in the middle. You see, they form those echelons. Strong men can go forward, weak men go backward. And they realise the back of this peloton, the wind has changed direction. With their change of direction, has now tore into the centre of the peloton. Strong men trying to repair the damage very, very quickly there, because they know if the door opens, they don't rejoin the peloton.
And that's as easy as it can split. A lot of the Belgian journalists this morning, Phil, were complaining to me. I was saying, well, you must be happy the rain is here. And they said, yeah, the rain is here, but there's not enough wind. They're never satisfied, are they?
There's actually quite a wind blowing just now. The flags are fluttering quite hard, but well, clearly there is a wind across the riders just now, because that split the field.
Well, it did, and these are the weaker riders, and you can see how they're nodding there on the 2 or 3 riders at the back end. They really are struggling to try that. This is the time when you don't want a problem, and that was number 92 stopped at the side of the road. Adam Blythe.
Yeah, the British rider on Amiga Farmer Lotto, but they really could do with a win, that team. They're being heavily criticised for the lack of results. And just look at that now. So the journalists who thought there was no wind didn't know what they were talking about, because the peloton will not do that without a crosswind, and it's tore right across the road. This is the worst direction for a weak cyclist in any big race, because you get split off, and the strong men will get back into the pack, and the others may have a long fight, and they're using up valuable energy now. Bad luck for Adam Blythe. He's a newcomer to the British scene of professional riding, and also a bit hairy on this corner here as well.
It certainly is. I tell you what, we're looking now, Phil, at about 25 kilometres to go to the start of the serious climbs. That first one was really much an amuse-bouche, an appetizer to the climbs of the day as we went over Denast there. But shortly in this 12-13 kilometre stretch, we'll get to the Kleisberg, or the Mont de l'Enclus, which is followed very quickly by the Knokteberg, and then it's the drop down into the town of Kreuzberg for the Old Quaremont, which is where you certainly want to be in the top 10 at the front of the main field. And the daffodils are out.
Yes, very nice they are too. Just reminding us on this Easter Sunday that spring is just around the corner. I'm not sure the riders would agree with that comment just at the moment, but certainly the sun is with them, but April showers are here as well. This is the breakaway, got away virtually from the gun. There was an attack straight away. It came from Floris Gusinen. He was quickly joined by 7 other riders, and they've been clear ever since. Maximum lead they've had 13 minutes. That's Gusinen at the right in the striped jersey for Skill, just coming to the back of the group. It's his fault that they're all in the lead and suffering now.
Well, just looking at the style of the riders, Phil, I think these guys are already starting to be a little bit pained in their pedalling action. They've been in the lead right from the very start, and that's so far probably not far off 3.5 hours of racing. So the body will be starting to say, ouch, this is hurting. We haven't got to the hard part of the race yet. They've gone over the flatlands of the East and West Flanders. Now that they're getting around into the serious part of the game, their bodies really are going to be screaming out for surrender.
Well, all the things I said about Joost van Lenen, it looks like he's got himself to the front now, and he's prepared to work here into Aina. 7:21 the gap here. Peloton looks as though now they're in the shelter of the houses, may have repaired the damage, but at what cost for later?
It's around about a 5 kilometre distance between that leading group of 8 riders and the main field, and that corresponds to 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Michael Barry comes up. You see how Team Saxo Bank, Phil, came up to the front end of the main field and organised themselves to get their men through that cobblestone section. Now they've disappeared away. Armstrong has moved up to the front over on the left-hand side, making himself force down that little bit of food, keep the energy levels up. An incredible incredible fast pedalling action, I have to say, that he's got, which has become his habit over the last few years.
Well, I read that as a very good sign to see Lance up here. It's been a pretty tough section of the race so far, and he's put himself in the right position where he can save energy and see what's coming his way very shortly. If the front end of the peloton splits, he's in the perfect place to go with it. That's good riding by Lance. We're not too sure how his form is, because he was sick and couldn't ride Milan San Remo. He had an okay Criterium International, but it wasn't his old self. But he'd be pleased to see that Contador also appeared human for a change, and he also struggled in Criterium International. So we'll see what happens today as Lance continues his preparation for the Tour de France.
I think a bit of relaxation now, slowing down. These guys know, Phil, that they've got a 20 kilometre section, 12 miles or so before they get to the next 3 climbs, Kleisberg, Knokteberg and the Col du Tourmalet. You notice as well Thor Hushoff moving up to the front end of the main field. These guys now are becoming rather attentive, realising that the race is about to start.
Well, there's certainly a tense atmosphere down there, and you can almost feel it through the television screens here. The riders are fighting to hold on to the positions, which is very important at this stage of the race. Let nobody come up. And the best way to do that is ride fast and block the road and keep them in their place.
Mark Cavendish at the front end, trying to learn a little bit what the Tour of Flanders is all about. I haven't noticed yet David Miller, who had a great week in the race between the Gent-Wevelgem and Tour of Flanders and the 3 days of Le Panne, getting himself a very confident win, I would have to say, because he pretty much called it before the start that he could do a good ride in the 3 days of Le Panne, and he really did dominate that time trial.
Cavendish was saying at the start that this is the dream he's always had, is to ride the Tour of Flanders. He was begging his team to select him. They have done. He's just really happy to be here. He hasn't got the form, I don't think, to win it. I'm not even sure this course would even suit him. He's here to help IJssel if he can. but he's so excited to be in this race.
Well, the thing is, Phil, as George Hincapie said before the start, this is a special race. With the Paris-Roubaix locked in, these races are races that have got so many stories around them, so many legends, and that's why young riders coming into the sport, they want to be part of that history, the history of the sport. They want to be able to know that they'll be in the coffee book table, the coffee table books for the sport of professional cycling, that we see so many photographs of the legendary moments of the sport, and I think that's one thing that motivates Cavendish.
Not too sure what that Futon Servetto rider was doing there, trying to pedal off the front. He's got a teammate up front who's got good form. He finished second in Singapore in a race about 3 weeks ago, the OBCB BC Singapore Grand Prix. And he's up in the breakaway right now, so I don't see why he wants to incite anybody to chase him down just at the moment, but that's what's happening. 7:09, we're back to another minute now, just coming on 7 minutes the lead. We've only been over the top of one small climb, 14 more to come. Here's the rider from and it's Fabio Felline, which is interesting. He's only 19, this is his first season as a pro. And he also rode well in Singapore. He won the sprint competition. Now he's chasing down his own teammate.
I think the idea there is he thought that the main field was slowing down. Again, a little bit of inexperience, and not it's like the Tour of Flanders evolves, and he thought he'd try and leap off the front, get himself a minute advantage or so that he could get to the next climb of the Klausberg ahead of the main pack and not had to fight to stay at the front of the main field. Just going through the town of Oudenaarde. And this is where the ladies' race started probably a couple of hours ago.
Yep.
The ladies doing roughly the last 120 kilometres of the men's circuit.
Yes, those signs like the organisation and press signs on the right, they're there for the people covering the women's event, which is now well underway. Follows the same route as the men into town, into the finish here in Meerbeek. And Ina Teutenberg, who has dominated this race these past few years, will be looking for a win again. She's on terrific form for HTC Columbia. Well, I suppose that they could land the double of men and women today, but that's all in the future. Still just on 7 minutes, and Felline has been joined by Tom Velers now, the big Dutchman, who is a very powerful rider on the flat.
Yes, and actually, Phil, as they go around the town square of Oudenaarde, they've been given a certain amount of freedom to get off the front end of the main pack. The Kermis is in town, and if you've ever heard about those circuit races in Belgium called the Kermis races, it's actually the town fair there that you can see that the Kermis race is usually associated with. As we go past that church, as we move away from the square, it's right down there in front of us where the centre of the Ronde van Vlaanderen is, the Ronde van Vlaanderen Museum. And certainly I would have to say very well worth a visit.
Well, they have a brasserie inside the museum, and all the items on the menu are bearing a resemblance to the Tour of Flanders. There it is now as we go past the front door of it, and you can have in fact a plate of Tom Bolognese, spaghetti Bolognese, I think they say.
Yeah, but one of the greatest additions they've just made very recently, Phil, is in fact they've brought in a section like a home trainer bike, a turbo bike that you can ride on, which feels as if you're riding the cobblestones of the Tour of Flanders. You've got to be a Belgian to think that up.
Oh, absolutely. But Freddie Martins, the great rider from Belgium, is now the manager of that, so you don't just get to see the museum now, you'd get to meet the big man himself. Well, he's a little man actually, he's just over 5 feet tall, but a great sprinter and a great winner of races like, in fact he holds the record for the wins in the Tour of France and in the Tour of Spain in the same year. 13
stage victories in a single Tour of Spain.
Well, there was one, I thought he was the only rider at one stage, nobody else was seen to be winning anything, but he's retired now, of course. He is the manager of that museum there in Oudenaarde, and he would welcome the opportunity to meet you, and speaks very good English, by the way.
Just to add on to what you were saying there, Phil, about Freddie Mertens, we now get very excited when a professional bike rider wins 15, 20, 25 races in a single season. Freddie Mertens, on 3 years of his career, was in excess of 50 victories in a single year. His most was 55 wins one season.
That's Merck's proportions for you, without a shadow of a doubt, and he beats the famous names of his period as well. Peloton easing just a little bit here in the streets of Oudenaarde as they just come back together again. Everybody inviting somebody else to attack just now. 116 kilometres to go, but all the real meat of the Tour of Flanders, after our little meander around northern Belgium, is still to come. Féliné, and is only 19 in his first pro season, joined by Tom Failers of the Dutchman on the Skill Shimano team.
Well, a little bit of news update, or should I say weather update, because although it's not raining here, information coming to me that in fact it's raining at the top of the Patersberg, which is not too far away from the Koppenberg, which may be why, Phil, the race organisers are thinking of deviating. Unfortunately, though, we won't get official news of that until we actually get to the bottom of the Koppenberg to see whether they go straight up or turn left.
Well, we'll know if we don't climb it. But I'd rather hope they do leave it in. But you do lose your momentum when you get onto these climbs, because the boys at the back have to literally almost stop to queue up to get onto the climb. It's so narrow. And that's when the trouble starts, because you can't start again, quite literally. You have to jump off your bike and run. But it's happened. We've seen even the great Tom Bonen running on the climbs and still winning at the end.
Well, that's a position on a bike there that's very difficult to mistake, because that man is a former winner of Paris-Roubaix. Servais Knaven, he's been threatening to retire for the last couple of seasons, Phil, and I have to say one thing. He has been brought into this team to be the team tactician on the road.
Well, good old Servais Knaven. He's been around for so long. He's on the Milram team. I honestly thought he had retired, Paul, to be absolutely honest. We first met Servais a long time ago in Australia, when he used to be a regular rider as an amateur in the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic, which was a stage race which ran down the eastern seaboard to Sydney.
Oh, ouch. Lance Armstrong might be wrong.
What's that?
I've just checked the date of birth of Servais Knaven.
He must
Phil,
be about 100.
39 years of age. He was born in the same year as Armstrong, but in March the 6th.
We should send Lance a Twitter right now and make him feel better. That's all I can say. There is Fabian Cancellara, the world time trial champion, the Olympic time trial champion, yellow jersey in the Tour de France, and can't wait to get to grips with this race today.
This is the work that's being done at the back. Housekeeping in the early part of the race, as riders moving up and down to make sure that their teammates are looked after. Steve Kosser, and he's got a lot of bottles there. He'll be riding up there looking to see whether he can look after David Miller and Tyler Farrar. 1, 2, 3
Matthew
going
Wilson,
forward there
yeah.
is Matt Wilson.
But has he got a bottle for Tyler Farrar? We don't know.
The main field, there were 2 riders stopping Farrar there when he had that mechanical incident involved in that crash, so he certainly should be back in the main field. The most important thing looking down from the helicopter, Phil, was he didn't appear to be injured.
Well, Team Sky are sneaking up on the left of our picture, one on the head of the race here. Well, they haven't got to impress the organiser of the Tour de France anymore, because they were named on Monday as part of the Tour de France, which was welcome back home in the UK, because this is a huge happening for the British team to make the Tour de France. The next stage is to win it. That's their aim over 5 years, is to win the Tour de France. But now they're in it, that's the next stage accomplished. But today they look as though their tail is really up. They have a real candidate here in Fletcher, the Spanish rider on their team. He's had one Belgian semi-classic win this year. He's ridden well in this race and in the upcoming Paris-Roubaix very well before. He's the only Spanish rider to podium in that race.
Well, there's a lot of serious names moving up to the front there. Cardoso, you see the rider in the grey jersey there. He's the Portuguese national champion. We saw him win a race in the early part of this year, and that was one of the stages of the Tour Down Under in Australia. That seems like a long time ago already.
It certainly does. It's been a long year for these boys already. They started racing the first week in January, usually in the southern hemisphere where the climate's suited, and it's their summer. And now here we are, the chill air of Belgium, and Australia and the heat a long way behind them.
That's the reason to make sure you've got more pressure on the back brake than the front one. Just have a look at your tyre there. It looks like there's a problem here for the skill rider who's just been
Yakkers
by one of the spectators at the side of the road that he's got a problem.
And Urtasun, the Euskadel rider, has been sat at the back all day, and that's the danger of doing that. He's involved in this crash there. Looks like everybody is okay. The peloton rolls on. Matty Breschel dead centre at the moment, surrounded by riders from Team Sky. Quick Step also in evidence in those blue jerseys.
Matteo Tossato over on that right-hand side of the road there. He'll be looking after the interests, of course, of Tom Bonen. Bonen quite happy to sit in the middle of the pack, keep himself away from the windy part of the peloton. But he will be not afraid at all, Phil, a little bit later on, to take the advantage and put on the pressure himself. Oops, I forgot about these 2 guys.
Haven't we all? Even our cameras didn't bother to go up there, but there's a Féliné and Valers are back in the pack now, having stretched their legs in the sunshine. Not too sure why they did that, but anyway, they're back in the field.
Kurt Adler Arvesen in the middle there as well, as the champion of
Norway.
Norway.
Yep.
And this is a problem here for one of the Radio Shack riders, Sebastian Russler. He's the Belgian rider. He's got, well, there's a flat tyre. And because there's just been that accident, this is why he's riding on the rim here. He's waiting for the team car to come up because the team cars got delayed by that crash a little bit further back. You see, this is the problem with a race like the Tour of Flanders. If there is a crash on the cobblestone sections, you may have to wait a minute and a half, 2 minutes even, for your team car to come up and change a tyre for you.
Well, Arvidsson's just getting back into the sport. He broke his collarbone in the Tour of Qatar, and it looks as though he's now settling in. He's riding right at the front, but he's going to worry about these little shunts. He knows they're going to happen on the Tour of Flanders, so he's keeping his nose clean and riding where... Look at this. This is the split from the crash. So Hutrovic is in this group. He was stopped by the crash, and now they're coming back.
And bear in mind that all of the team cars and the service cars are behind these riders, so anybody who has a mechanical incident has got to be caught by these guys and then wait for the team car to come up, and that can lose you half a minute or a minute, and you may well not even get back into the race if there's an acceleration now.
Absolutely right. Our camera's allowed into the gap, but no motor vehicle will be allowed into this gap until it either shuts down or widens out. It's tough because, after all, a crash is a crash, and it's not really part of the effort of the day's racing, so sometimes the judges turn a blind eye, but today they're playing it by the book. Nobody in the middle except the motorbikes.
Which is why there's a kind of unofficial mechanical assistance in the Tour of Flanders. There'll be a lot of supporters, should I say, who wear normal civilian clothes at the end of the cobble sections or the end of the climbs, so the riders will know that if they can get through that section, and when they've got a mechanical incident, they can get a spare tyre from a supporter at the end of the cobblestone section.
Not a mechanic. Is that allowed?
Grey area.
I remember, yes, I remember Roger de Vlaming being disqualified once, taking the wheel from a spectator.
Other way around. It was Freddie Mertens, and he dragged Roger de Vlaming to the finish, if you remember.
No, I don't.
Oh, shame.
Okay.
It was.
Anyway, these boys pushing up. Sky, Saxo Bank seem to be the drivers. Quick-Step are getting into the mix as well. Radio Shack are also riding extremely well. Lance Armstrong keeping himself nicely in position here. Just in case things do split here. Popovic is also up here as well. So the strong men are trying to get through and establish themselves. It's not easy at all. And there's irony above irony. It's Lance Armstrong's team of a year ago taking over the head of the race, Astana.
Yeah, Team Astana, they don't really have a strong squad here, I don't think, in this race, and they've got guys like Scott Davis, Alan Davis. Gasparotto may well be tipped as an outsider to get himself inside of the top 10, because he does usually ride fairly well in Belgium.
Watch out for Alan Davis. He says that he can do well today. He's looking for a result, so we'll see. He's riding alongside his brother now, as Paul has said, Scott and Alan. Two Queenslanders, but Alan is by far the more accomplished with 33 wins. He had a very good ride last year. He was fourth in Milan-San Remo, and then not a lot for the rest of the season. He got a second in Paris-Brussels towards the end of the year last September. But he is a good rider, although he's still to show us a great performance in this particular race. Well, he says he's up for it today, so we're going to find out.
Well, a bit of calm now, Filmer, coming to the main field. They'll calm down for a fraction. Oh, there's a crash right in the
that's
front.
A heavy fall.
Oh, that has blocked the road.
Well, that was amazing, and that wasn't far away from Lance Armstrong, so let's go in. I don't see any Radio Shack rider down. Must have happened right on his wheel there, Paul, because he was just at the front of the race. Rabobank's gone down. One or two riders fell heavily there. That wasn't such a routine tumble at all. This looks like Sergei Ivanov putting his wheel back in. The Euskaltel Euskadi rider there is Agure, and it looks like he's hurt his collarbone. He fell very, very heavily there. It's rather sad to see at such a time. And another faller there is Grivko, Andrei Grivko. Another strong man down.
Well, the sad thing, Phil, is that the crash was right at the front end of the main field, and that is quite rare for that to happen, and that is really a little slice of bad luck. But you can see the chaos that it's caused now. Team cars are all in a traffic jam on the left-hand side. They'll be trying to figure out, do we need to get out of the car? Have we got to take a spare wheel up, a spare bike up? And it makes it difficult for the riders involved in that accident to get themselves back up to the main field, because there will be no convoy of cars. There's a quick-step rider who is still a Katusha rider still at the side road. But have a look at this again. It was right up at the front end of the main field.
It was actually because they were jumping off the ruts on the... There you are, just that little rut of the road there.
It's that little join, it's the Death Valley that is so predominant in these races in Belgium. And these guys riding at the front here, they didn't even look across to see. They will have heard that crash, but they didn't even think about it.
Well, it was the Astana rider who tried to bunny hop across the road there out of that ditch, and he fell and he took out, unfortunately, the very unlucky Gorka Izaguirre there, the Spanish rider. So that really is a shame.
No, it certainly is a bit of chaos, and that's going to happen many, many times today in a race like this. And again, that is why you've got to ride at the front end of the main field and hope that you avoid those incidences and don't, in fact, waste too much energy, because a lot of energy is required on the running towards the finish. That's the scramble at the back now, that long line of riders on the left-hand side of the road trying to get themselves back in contact.
Yeah, this is unfortunately happened at a time when we just recovered from the 2 crashes we've had. And now that one has really put the pressure on, and I don't think we'll see some of those riders rejoining the field right now. This is Mark Cavendish here looking over his shoulder. I wonder if it's his dream is still to be in the Tour of Flanders right now. He's had a bit of a rough ride, but he doesn't look to be under any pressure.
Well, it's a learning process for him, and that's one of the main reasons why he wanted to come here to have a look at this bike race. And he was riding at the front end of the pack and was probably slowed down by that accident.
Yeah, he was a bit earlier on that, absolutely right. This is Rui Faria da Costa, also cased upon, just ahead of him there. And the rider on Radio Shack, I think, is Sebastian Rosler. He's had his moments too, but he's still at the back of the race. There's Mark Cavendish, there's Rosler.
Strong rider from Team Radio Shack. He's got a teammate up alongside him to try and pull him back in. He's been involved in a couple of accidents too so far. That looks like David Miller as well, just in front of them for Garmin Transitions, the second rider with the blue shorts on.
5 minutes 16 in amongst all these diversionary tactics, where they're still coming back, those leaders, down to almost 5 minutes now, heading towards the last 100 kilometres. And it's getting to look extremely like rain at the finish. In fact, the umbrellas are going up at the finishing line, so we are getting these April showers around the hills of Flanders. They might encounter them, and it'll turn those cobblestones into skating rinks if they happen to be on them at the time.
The only advantage I have to say, though, Phil, is the fact that it has rained an awful lot in the last 48 hours. The worst cobbles are actually when it's not rained for 2 or 3 weeks, then you get a small splattering of moisture over the top of them. At least they'll be reasonably clean, and you're better off having completely saturated cobblestones than slightly moist ones, because it clears that film off the surface of them.
Across the tail, the wind just there, but we're going to get it right across the riders here, and if the pressure goes on at the front again, we'll see the bunch concertina. This is Rasch here of Germany on the front, champion of Germany off to the left, as Saxo Bank get on with the job of driving here. Stuart O'Grady, that face set, he's such a strong bike rider. And looks like Jeremy Hunt in the centre there too.
Yeah,
is he riding?
I saw Jeremy Hunt at the start, and I tried to say hello to him, but he looked so concentrated on the job at hand, because they've lost one of the strong players of their squad, Cervelo Test team, with the little problem that Heinrich Hausler has got with his knee. He finished second in this bike race last year, and he would be looking to try and be one of the big favourites, I think, if he hadn't had to pull out. Greg Henderson over on the right hand side for Team Sky. Sky really have pulled a very good squad together, and bringing in that rider Juan Antonio Fletcher was a big coup. There was a lot of talk about that during the Tour de France, but of course nobody was allowed to announce anything official till the start of the proper transfer season.
Well, this is a much more angry peloton now. There's nobody waiting for the last crash, that's for sure. And the message has been passed around to some of the riders who are quickly repositioning here at the front, including the rider there from Garmin. As we go down to the pack, this is the return of Stephen Kotzer.
Or it may not be, because I think he's got a flat tyre.
Oh, he's going the other way, is he? Surely not.
He's just trying to stay in contact. You look at the back tyre,
yeah, he's
it's
down.
slowly softening, and he will keep riding along like this to stay in contention. He will have put his hand up to indicate to the race referees that he's got a flat tyre, but because of the nature of this race and the service cars getting involved in traffic problems, you see how the back end of his bike is tailing a little bit there. He will wait until the Garmin Transitions team car comes up and gets to the back. There he's stopping on the right.
Well, he's no choice now. It was almost down there. There's a Swiss flag on the right of the road as well. There's a few shortcuts here, including the rider from B-Box who didn't know which way to go. And he's put himself back on his road.
He was going to take a shortcut.
That's Damien Godin.
He was going to take a shortcut across that car parking space, but he hadn't noticed the chain across it up the other end.
It's unreal. Anzagum 5 minutes the gap, more or less now. 104 kilometres to go. Still the Saxo Bank, Cervelo, HTC got a nice grip at the head of the peloton. It takes a lot of hold. There's Big George Hincapie, he also knows the right place to be right now. The United States road racing champion. These boys know that this is could be the first decision time here, because they're racing towards hill number 2 and the pace is on now.
Well, it's about 7 or 8 kilometres to hill number 2 for the main field who we are looking at, and it's around 3 or 4 kilometres for the leading group of riders. And the reason is the Klausberg is followed very quickly by the Knokteberg and then followed by the Eau de Quaremont, which is so important to hit in the first 10 to 15 places, and that's why you see the big names coming to the front now, Phil.
So as they continue, this is life at the back, and it's a matter of just hanging on here at the moment. Rabobank bringing Tom Wieler is one, Tom Lisa rather is one guy coming back here in the group.
But also Lars Boom,
yeah.
he's had a bit of a problem at the back end.
There were 2 of them stopped after that crash on the right of the road, so they were both down, I think.
Yep, there will have been. Lars Boom, the rider who had a great start to the year with his performances, of course, in Paris-Nice, and he'd actually hoped to keep that jersey a long way down the road. Interesting thing about Boom is he's an incredible cyclocross champion. He's been the national champion of Holland in cyclocrossville since 2001, completely undefeated.
Well, he was I mean, that was his sport, but then he thought he'd have a go at road racing, and he found he can do that equally as well. So he is a huge talent, there's no doubt about that, and I think we're going to see a lot of Bohm in the years to come.
Yeah, and he's only 24 years of age, and he's been riding cyclocross since he was a junior all the way through. He's been world champion at that. But and you mentioned about him moving across to the road racing. He's also been world under 23 time trial champion. There's Mr. Armstrong. It looks to me as if he's enjoying the Flanders. The big man over on his left-hand side, by the way, there, of course, was Gregory Rast. This is Sergei Ivanov, and it looks as if he's had a little problem at the back end of the race too. So remember him winning a stage of the Tour de France, a long breakaway when he rode for the big Italian team, Fassa Bortolo. A long charge down into Aix-les-Bains on a fairly rainy day. Champion of Russia.
There's that big peloton here. Once this road narrows down again, there's going to be a few deep breaths necessary as they head now towards this second climb. What do you know much about the second climb, Paul?
No, the second climb, Phil, the Klausberg is a climb that a lot of the local amateurs around here ride, especially on training rides. It's a smooth ride from the section they will go over. It's around about 1 kilometre in length. It's got 2 names because it's almost on the linguistic border, because that's what they talk about down here, the French-speaking part of Belgium and France, and of course the Flanders. It's called the Mont de l'Enclus on one side and the Klausberg on the other side.
Yes, it's an amazing country is Belgium, but there are people who don't speak both languages, and once they cross this linguistic border, they use sign language because they simply can't speak the others, either Flemish or French. 4:27, it's coming down because of the infighting which is now developing in the peloton.
Michael Barry at the front, Hulsman.
He's ridden pretty well.
Hulsman's is doing a lot of work. Stewie O'Grady, I don't think Stewie's thinking too much about himself and a performance by O'Grady for Australia today. He's thinking about Cancellara, because the 2 riders on Team Saxo Bank this year, Matti Breschel and Fabian Cancellara, have both won very big races in Belgium. Breschel winning the race across Belgium, which is basically based in the Flanders, and of course the Grand Prix E3, which is a famous race which was taken by Fabian Cancellara this year with a solo performance.
The bleak roads of Belgium now as we continue through Flanders. You can understand now where they'll be very happy if it doesn't rain just at the moment. It would turn conditions into being extremely unpleasant. Barry Hulsmans continues to tap out the rhythm here, trying to let nobody in. Just tucked in down the line there, Fabian Cancellara.
Well, I'd actually forgotten about this section of cobblestones. It's a very smooth section. This is the cobblestone section of Warenstraat, and it's just out of the small town of cobblestones. But again, you see, once the pressure's put on at the front, you can see the damage that's been done at the back end of the main field here. It's very difficult. You've got to ride the cobblestones with power. You can't actually ride cobblestones with a supple high cadence. You've got to have the big gear in and keep thumping it along. And the other tactic as well is to make sure you don't hold the handlebars too tightly. If you're a good cobblestone rider, you keep your hands in the middle of the handlebars very, very loosely, just allowing the front end of the bike to try and find the smoothest path over those cobbles.
And making sure your hands don't jump off the handlebars, which is a horrible feeling if they both come off at the same time.
Exactly.
Which has happened to me in the past. Well, the crowd are everywhere here. You'd be forgiven if you thought you were watching Paris-Roubaix at the moment, but you're not. You're watching the Tour of Flanders on Easter Sunday. And Saxo Bank, with a little help from Michael Barry of Team Sky, have got control of the head of the peloton just for the moment. 4:13 is the gap to 8 riders who got clear soon after the start. Oh, and a little bit wide there, Stuart, as he realised he was running out of road.
He used all of the road, and that was the important thing. These riders, by the way, will have known this route. Many of them will have come over. They stay in Belgium for a couple of weeks, and on many of their training days, they come out and ride over these cobblestone sections. You might have noticed there the sort of unofficial feeding post at the side there. A lot of teams with bottles to hand up, and again, that is basically because so often on these cobblestone sections the riders lose their drinks, and you don't want to be without a drink or have to have the extra energy to go back to the team car to take on board drinks. So the teams organise small feeding zones at the end of every cobblestone section. O'Grady, I think, sacrificing himself today, finding form for a little bit later in the season. Kevin Hulsman's next to him. Michael Barry next to him with the energy bar in his mouth. Those are the guys who've just got to pound out and keep doing the work, and they're doing a good job because it's now down to 4 minutes from 13 minutes advantage.
Yes, they started the fight back a lot earlier this time around. Anyway, Tyler Ferrari's back, Paul. There's no doubt about that now, because there he is, and he's got himself right to the front of the peloton here. So he's done well from that first crash that we saw. There's been 2 more since then to cause disruptions, and I think one of them has resulted in a broken collarbone for Gorky Izagira, who was left on the road holding his shoulder. We're now into Kirkover.
Yes, talking to Tyler Farrar this morning, Phil, he was very confident, and he was also very motivated to be here, especially I think having got himself a victory. As we look here at David Miller, who got himself a very good victory for Team Garmin Transitions in the 3 days of Le Panne, which is a fairly famous race and always used as an indicator as to who is going to ride well in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. But I noticed with interest that Tom Bonen didn't ride the 3 days of Le Panne this year. He decided to prepare in a different climate to get himself ready for the Tour of Flanders and have maybe that little bit of energy left over.
Interesting, because Dane de Volder, who is Bonen's teammate and won this race the last 2 years, did ride the Panna.
Whoops.
There's a bit of a problem here now, excuse me, as the riders realised that that roundabout wasn't going to work, so they quickly changed direction.
I would say there weren't any Belgians went that way, because they would have known exactly what was going to happen on that roundabout.
Spectators behind. I remember Dagot Lawrenson once crashing in Paris-Roubaix, and he fell through the crowd into a ditch. And as he climbed out, he had to ask the crowd, could he come back onto the race, because they'd all started to watch the race again and closed up the gap.
Yeah, you can see now we're 99 kilometres to go for the leaders. And there's around about 2 kilometres difference between the leaders and the main field. And the reason they're getting a bit agitated, Phil, is because we've got 3 climbs starting to line up now. The Klausberg is around about 1 kilometre to the Klausberg for the leaders and about 3 kilometres to the Klausberg for these main riders in the main field.
There's no relaxing in this bunch, though. Very nervous moments here. He just slipped to the back a little bit.
Mechanical.
This is Sebastian Rosler's not his day today. He's got a flat tyre now.
He's not having a good day. He's probably not very happy about this at all. One of the Belgian riders on Team Radio Shack, just waiting for the team car to come up alongside it. Mechanics on a day like this, and you can see he's just keeping rolling along because he doesn't want to lose too much time until his team car gets up alongside him. Just watch how he carefully negotiates
his
this.
Back wheel's tyre's going to roll off here. He's stopped in Portugal back in February, so he's off to a good start. New team for him, of course, as it is for everybody on Radio Shack. He's got a teammate here. Now, has he got a puncture as well?
I think they were all going down with their flat tyres. That looks like Irizar, who also had a mechanical.
It was, so 2 for the price of 1 here, Radio Shack. Sounds like an offer there, doesn't it?
2 for 1.
We go back to the leaders now. And again, look at that long, thin line as the pressure stays on at the front, and riders are being disrupted here for many reasons, including the traffic furniture and flat tyres. It's been a very active peloton today, and a lot of the action has been looking after yourself rather than setting the pace. 3:39 now.
quite amazing. You look at the front end of that pack, Phil, and it doesn't really look as if they're charging along at high speed, but when you look at how long the main field is, that's the indicator.
Absolutely.
That's the indicator that this chase is really setting itself up in earnest, because everybody wants to be at the front for the Klausberg, Knokteberg, and of course the El Quaremont. Now these are the first serious climbs, the climbs number 2, 3 and 4. They're each around about 1 kilometer in length, but we're starting to get to slightly higher gradients. 14.5% gradient for the Klausberg, 13% for the Knokteberg, and of course the El Quaremont, although a little bit easier at only 4% average, it's 11% at the bottom.
These are the names for you of the leaders that broke away from the gun today. Miguel Ignatieff, probably one of the best known in the breakaway. The best known is without doubt Vicente Garcia da Costa, one of the oldest men in the race and been a professional for 15 seasons. He's won 2 stages of the Vuelta, Tour of Spain, and a stage of the Tour de France. In amongst his 9 victories, there he is in the black, just enjoying himself at the front, and happy that they're keeping out of the chaos in the peloton right now, I would suspect. But they know that the lead is coming down. They can't survive many of the hills. Here's the next one, the Kleisberg. 14.5% is the steepest point. It's got an average of 6.8.
Yeah, but of course these next 2 climbs are not too much to worry about for these guys, Phil, because they're smooth surfaced climbs. The climbs later on, like the Quaremont. The Quaremont is the first cobbled climb of the day. So this is the Klausberg from this side, and when you drop down the other side, it's known as the Mont de l'Enclou in French.
So we'll descend the Mont de l'Enclou.
And we climb the Klausberg.
Okay. Just setting the pace at the front here, the Katusha rider, Ignatieff. Now, are we losing a couple of the back? I don't think so. But now there must be some passengers here. There must be some boys getting very tired. They've been in the lead for 150 kilometres nearly.
Yeah, it's quite a nasty climb actually, Phil, from this side, because it's one of those climbs that gets steeper and steeper. The steepest part of the climb is at the top, so you're losing your momentum all of the way. Ignatieff, 2004 Olympic gold medalist in the points race, and very good track rider, raced right through the Russian squad for many years before moving across the road. An aggressive rider. Since the forming of Team Katusha and of course Team Tinkoff Credit Systems, he's really been a rider who's been in a lot of breakaway attempts. He's not scared to go up the road.
No, he's been at the top of his game since he was a junior back in 2002. He hasn't really come through as a top professional yet. Very important to have him on the professional team. He's a strong, solid man. You can see by the way he's climbing here. He's asked for no help on this climb. He's just kept himself a very nice tempo. He has hurt some riders because you can see they're dangling at the back now, and he'll keep the pressure on. He'll probably want to reshuffle this breakaway now and get rid of the chap and see if they can carry on and stretch that lead back out again.
Well, he's not taking any prisoners. Just look at his face. He looks across there, and the other flags that you can see in the side of the road a lot is the Flemish flag, the Flanders Lion. And they're all out today because this is their World Championships. This is the top of the climb. It's actually a little bit of a resort area that a lot of people come to at the weekend, because there's some very nice little restaurants up here. But I don't think our young man from Futon Soveto at the back here, Michel Merlot, is thinking at all about stopping for Sunday lunch.
No, he's only a youngster. Well, he's not a youngster. He's about 25, 24 and a half years of age. But he's fairly new to this level of cycling. He's on a Pro Tour team now with Soveto, Futon Soveto. So we'll see. The legs must be tired now, and he'll be heading back to the peloton, I think, pretty soon. 3:11 is the gap. They'll all be heading back to the peloton pretty soon. And just look at this, Paul. I think the whole Saxo Bank team are on the front.
I think they're taking this rather seriously here this afternoon. Look at the face on Stuart O'Grady just over to the right-hand side there. The big teams are moving up now, Phil. They're getting themselves very attentively to the front end of what is the start of the aggression. Everybody wants to make sure that they're in the ideal position moving forward to the Col du Tourmalet, which is coming up in a little while.
And the 2 riders seeking the smoothness of the sidewalk there. Not such a good idea, because they've got to cross that little channel where the crash was caused by the Astana rider earlier, but they're all safely over. Still Saxo Bank, their orders today quite simply get the pace and hold it as they head towards the Kleisberg. Now it is a tough climb. I think you'll see riders unhitched at the back of the race right now, and there's been another crash, have there?
Yeah, one of that was Kevin Hulsmans, and he will have been at the front end of the main pit. It looked to me though as if it wasn't a crash, Phil. I think what happened in fact was he probably dropped a chain.
Well, there he is on the left. Yeah, you're right. That's Danilo Weiss who hit him, I think. No, his chain's still on.
No, I think Danilo Weiss drove
his gears off.
Danilo Weiss drove into his back wheel there, and he's probably created a little bit of damage. That's a big loss for Quick-Step because he's one of the big workers on that squad.
Well, he'd have to get back. What a horrible place to have a problem, right at the base of the climb there. Everybody's out of the saddle up here.
Scott Davis over on the
Danilo
right
Weiss is straight back into the race on the left there for Team BMC.
And Scott Davis over on the right-hand side wearing number 21. This is the faces of the riders at the front are all very concentrated. Greg Henderson.
Yeah, this is still. No, this is Rosler. He's come back, so he got a good wheel change, and he's chased back very, very well indeed, Sebastian Rosler.
And I wonder, if Irizar hadn't passed his wheel across to him, because Irizar maybe had been thinking about looking after this guy who's a very experienced Belgian on Team Radio Shack.
Would be a good move, maybe. Anyway, 3:05 is the gap. 95 kilometres left to go. Greg Henderson stamping out the message for Team Sky just off our screen now. Trouble for Hutrovic. Looks like the old legs aren't quite ready for the season yet. He's struggling on the climb.
Well, he's much more of a sprinter, a rider who very much enjoys the flatter, shorter stages. And this race at 260 kilometres is a tough race for a lot of people. That's Hulsmann's there trying to get himself back in contact.
Yes, one or two riders have been hurt by this climb now. This is Bandiera.
Look at Hulsmann's though, he's banging his way through the main field. You see, in the back of his mind, all he's thinking about is De Volder and Boonen. I've got to stay in this race for as long as possible. The important thing about a race like this, the Ronde van Vlaanderen, is having a lot of teammates in the finale down towards the end.
Well, there's no doubt who's in charge of the race to the mountains, at least, and that's going to be a big result here for the Saxo Bank. They've done extremely well as they continue to set the pace.
Well, for that explanation, they're now descending the Mont de l'Enclus, the other side of the Klausberg. A very short transition between now and the Knokteberg, around about 8 kilometers. You drop down off this climber from around here and along the valley road back towards the town of Arvelgem, then turn left up the Knokteberg. A very nasty climber. It's a kilometer long. It's an average of 8%. It kicks up at the top to around about 13%.
2:58, inside 3 minutes for the breakaway. They are still the attraction to the race, but in reality the actual race is right here, and the tactics being played out are all in favour of Saxo Bank at the moment. But sooner or later Fabian Cancellara will have to come and take up the race for himself if he is to be the winner of the day. But there's still so many climbs to come, and really the race hasn't started as far as the climbs are concerned just yet. We have some cobbled brutes.
Certainly coming through the town of Orwa, and everybody now getting nervous, and I'm amazed at the attentiveness of Team Saxo Bank. They were all very concentrated at the start this morning. Didn't get a chance to talk to any one of the riders on that squad because they were huddled in that zone which you know is the game face day. This is the toughness at the back. There you can see Kevin Hulsmans. He had that little bit of a contretemps with a rider who rode into his back tyre. He's looking for the team management, but there will be so many riders. The team car here, Phil, could be as much as 2 minutes behind. Look to the front there, Kevin, because there's a bit of road furniture which you've avoided nice and safely.
I think he's still got a problem with the back wheel. I mean, he keeps on looking at it, and he's really annoyed now because he's made a huge effort to get back up into the race, but he still has a problem.
But this is the sad thing, Phil, about he's trying to mend this himself, that it's been smacked at the back and his team car can't get through quick enough to him. He's looking down there and he's got a chance because the way the race is unfolding, this again you can see him, he's not happy at all with that, looking down, and he is a strong ally for Team Quick-Step. I reckon if they can change his bike and get it sorted out very quickly, the race will slow down a fraction once they start the Knokteberg, and that will allow him one chance to get himself back into the main field.
Well, I can tell you, as we watch the men's race here, there's been a surprise in the women's race today, because Grace Verbeek has just won on her own in the Women's Tour of Flanders, and that is a very, very surprised result. She rides for the Lotto team, and the team of Rochelle Gilmore, the Australian. Now, what's happened here? This looks like also a fall.
Yep, you see that traffic furniture at the side of the road there. This is Alexander Kuczynski, and he's obviously smacked into that roadside directional island there. Team car hasn't got to him just yet. You've got to be so attentive. That's the thing about the Tour of Flanders. You've got to be not only keeping an eye on the riders who are right in front of you, but keeping an eye on how the road is developing, which again is why I keep saying, Phil, that all of the big men want to ride in the first 15 to 20 places. It takes a lot of nervous energy to do that, but it is so much safer.
But you've got to have extreme talents to be able to hold your position here. Saxo Bank have had a terrific race so far, but it can all go so quickly wrong. A change of wind direction, a weakness of one of the riders. Things happen at the front as well as at the back, as we've seen today. And this might be the situation with Kuzinski. I'm not sure where we're looking until we see. It must be on the right. There's the traffic
left
problem.
There it is. We didn't see.
No, he's already, the chain is off, but I think he hit something.
Yeah, he's gone down. He looks as if he's pretty badly hurt. Team Skyfill are also well organised there at the front. You see, this is what the Tour of Flanders is all about. You stay in the front group there, and then you're not subjected to these accelerations and decelerations that the riders in the back are having to go through all the time. It's all about energy. If you're in that back part of the group, you're using excessive amounts of energy to pull yourself back into the race, and you can't do that. It's like having a bank account. You can't spend more than you've got in the bank account, otherwise you go into the red zone.
Just watching them go around that beacon, standing in the middle of nowhere. They're unsighted, they would go straight into it, but they're all safely by it. But it's disrupted the chase again. They're going to get them back, but as you say, the amount of energy you leave on the road to rejoin, and somebody's opened the door here, is to be believed.
And that's again when these accidents happen, because you're on the rivet, as they say in the sport of professional side. You're looking at the wheel of the guy in front when you start to be under a pressure a little bit.
Yeah, blind
and you're
faith.
not looking further up the road, and that's when the accident happened, because the guy in front at the last minute pulls out to avoid the incident that might be in the road, and then all of a sudden, bang, you're into it.
2:17. All the distractions of the peloton, and still being driven on by Saxo Bank. Remarkable pacemaking today. If Cancellara wins today, he'll be first to congratulate his team on the fine job well done, but that's still to come. Up front, have we all got 8 riders? As far as I know, everybody is still together as we head out to the third climb of the day, to Knokteberg. It's 13% maximum, 8% in general. And what's the SP on this one, Paul? Cobbled?
No, this is again, it's a smooth climb, and once you get towards the top, it gets that little bit steeper. And funnily enough, it's on the opposite side of the hill to the older Quaremont. So if you're a spectator, this is not a bad place to go, because you can stand in one spot. You see them come up the Knokteberg, turn left down into the town of Kruisberg, and then the race goes around and then back up the Quaremont. And in fact, it just comes out not too far away from the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat, or the Tour of Flanders Street. It goes up smoothly to begin with, and it kicks up to that 13% gradient right at the very top.
Well, they are all together, so even though we had 1 or 2 struggle, they've rejoined on the flatter roads. Now they're going to see the hills rise again. This brings a lie to the fact that people think Belgium is flat. Believe me, it is not only not flat. If you go down into the Walloon area and to the Ardennes, the climbs are very long, as we'll see in Liège-Bastogne-Liège in a couple of weeks' time. But the pace again being set by Ignatiev. He's happy when he's setting the own tempo.
He certainly is, and that's probably the best way to do it, because you're not subjected to anybody else's pressure. Those must be the heads of state in that front group of riders. They're very together, and all of the big names riding in the first 10-15 places to make sure they don't get subjected to the factor of being in that long line at the back. But I tell you what, Phil, you have a look, the main field is actually practically at the back of the race.
I think there's a lot of weak riders back there. They keep to be fighting themselves back into the picture, but at what cost for later? Because there'll be no fighting back once we get into the helter-skelter world of the Flanders Bergs, as they call them. Then it's literally every man for himself. Little bit of a section of narrow cobbled road added into the course this year around the Molenberg as well, which they say is very narrow, and the cobblestones are very big. Well, we're going to find out for ourselves pretty soon. Inside 2 minutes now for the leaders as they come up towards the end of the Knokteberg, as Joost van Leyen is the rider setting the pace for Vacansoleil.
Now there is a crack in this leading group of 8 riders. 3 riders now starting to fall off the back. But just expanding on your story there, Phil, about the change of the Molenberg. The Molenberg has been put a little bit later on because the organisation didn't like the fact that it was always a little bit of a panic to get into the right-hand bend. But to make it just a little bit more juicy, there's around about 3.5 kilometres of cobblestones between the climb before the Molenberg and the Molenberg itself. And Tom Bonen reckons it's going to make it a much more difficult approach to that section of climbs.
Well, it's all for later, and we're all interested to see it. Right in the centre of our picture there is Matti Breschel. He's also a member of the Saxo Bank team. He's just pulling on his Champion of Denmark's jersey. And we've had another problem here.
Well, I think that was
just a stopping of the race.
Well, that's because these riders are getting stuck in a traffic jam at the back. Once a little while ago at the front end of the main field, and now he's stuck at the back.
Well, I don't wish to sound as though I'm laughing at a rider's full up, but Servais is a pretty good friend of ours, and he is such a remarkable cyclist. He doesn't win too many races, he certainly doesn't win any these days, but he has won Paris-Roubaix, and he has been the champion of Holland, and he is an extremely nice character. Anyway, he sat down, he's used to it all, and he's got himself back.
Why these guys want to ride at the front there. You can see the white cross on the red jersey there. Fabien Cancellara looking a little bit further back. I noticed the Belgian national champion was in there as well, Tom Bonen. He won't be too far away from the mix on a day like this.
Servais has never had a top 10 finish, by the way, in the Tour of Flanders, but he certainly had plenty in the other classics like Paris-Roubaix and Ghent-Wevelgem, and indeed he's finished third in Het Volk, which is now called Het Nieuwsblad. Different newspaper, but the same race. Minute 51, 89 kilometres to go, and the race, I have to remind you, is really yet to begin, because I think they reserve the Tour of Flanders for the strongest.
They certainly do. This is again chaos at the back, and all of the time there's Servais Knaven on the left, 154. And this is where you really don't want to be. Psychologically, you know, you've got to slow there.
And here comes Kevin again, got his wheel fixed, and look at the mess in front of him.
You can give me a bit of credit for predicting that, Phil, because I did expect there to be a slight slowing down on this climb, and Kevin Holzmans has got back in. But watch the way.
Slowing down, they stopped.
Extremely. Well, that is fairly slow, isn't it?
It is fairly slow.
But he took advantage of that. And watch number 5 there, because once they get onto the slightly wider road over the top of this climb and drop down into the town of Kruisbergen, he will then try and get himself up to the front to look after the interests of Tom Bonen.
Well, I have to say that Saxo Bank, despite all of this, they've got the advantage of being at the front. It takes a lot of strength to get there, but you see now they're really just riding up this climb, and the chaos behind them is none of their business.
Stewie O'Grady in the middle. What a talent, Stewie. Seems as if he's been around forever. Rode the Olympic Games in Atlanta way back in 1996 for the Australian track squad. And again, chaos at the back.
And this is all because riders can't get by riders in front, or they've slipped a gear, or the chain has come off, and this is the result. And it's still Rossler having a real battle on the right there for Radio Shack. He really doesn't want to be here, but he doesn't seem to have much choice right now.
Well, there's nowhere to get round. You just cannot move up in a situation like this, which is why Saxo Bank have got all of the first 8 places in the road, and they've got no chaos at all. They're riding their own tempo. They're not involved in any of that go, stop, start at the back, which again takes away nervous energy.
Just trying to see if I could spot Lance there. He's still up there, I think. He's still in about the first 15-20 riders as he went round that corner.
Good number of Radio Shack riders in the first 15 to 20 positions. Once we've come over the top here, this is the summit now of the climb, the Knokteberg. And this is the little bit of a problem at the back, and this is Tom Stamsnijder. Now, his father, sadly, I have to say that I raced with his father, as Henny Stamsnijder, who's a world cyclocross champion.
Yes, he actually won a junior title, I think he was, in cyclocross in Middlesbrough in Great Britain when he was starting out with his career. Yeah.
There we go. This is the back end of the main field, and you'll see a massive acceleration because we're right on the top of the range of hills, which include the Col du Tourmalet and, of course, the Koppenberg a little bit later on. And if the riders were to continue going in the direction they are now, they would head off to the Col du Tourmalet. This is the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat, the Tour of Flanders Street.
And still the crowd, and the Breton flag of France is flying down there today, so they've made quite a long drive to be on the Easter Sunday course of the Ronde van Vlaanderen today. Again, another little split has formed in the group, and this is how they've got to repair the damage once more. It really is tough at the back, and the energy they're throwing to the wind and going absolutely nowhere, let's face it.
Well, to the journalist who said there was no wind on the course this afternoon.
There's the answer again.
The fact that these guys are all huddling down the right-hand side is the indicator that the wind is coming from the left-hand side of the road. This is the descent now, Phil, down into the town of Kruisbergen, and they're heading into East Flanders as well. And now we're starting to get to the juicy bit of the race, the real starting point I've always felt of the Tour of Flanders, and that is the Col du Tourmalet.
I have to say that this is really a very hard race in the peloton today. There's about 24 riders who have just held position at the front there, and the rest are racing flat out just to stay in the peloton. These boys rejoining at the front now. O'Grady, the solid man he is, just off to the left of our picture. And again, look at this now. Everybody wants to race. What's the next climb called? That's why they're racing now.
The next climb is called the Oude Quaremont, the Old Quaremont. It's 2.2 kilometers long. The average gradient is a bit deceptive. It's only